بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على أشرف الأنبياء والمرسلين سيدنا ونبينا ومولانا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين. We concluded the last lesson explaining that Allama Jassas al-Razi, a great scholar who lived between 305 Hijri to 370 Hijri, he quoted almost 90% of all that Isa ibn Aban rahimahullah said regarding Tawātur. Isa ibn Aban rahimahullah was the student of Imam Muhammad rahimahullah. He wrote Al-Raddu ala Bishr al-Marisi, a refutation on Bishr al-Marisi. So Bishr al-Marisi was a student of Imam Abu Yusuf rahimahullah. And he was a great faqih, but he became a Mu'tazili. Thus, Isa ibn Aban rahimahullah wrote a refutation against him. And in this kitab, he wrote a lot about Tawātur. So the book Al-Raddu ala Bishr al-Marisi is no longer available. However, Allama Abu Bakr al-Jassas rahimahullah, he quoted the summary in his own words, and I will quote the summary. So it is simple Arabic. You can listen attentively while I quote the Arabic. There is no need for a full translation. He says, وقد ذكر أبو موسى عيسى بن أبان رحمه الله جملة في ترتيب الأخبار وأحكامها في كتابه في الرد على بشر المريس في الأخبار، وأنا أذكر معانيها مختصرة دون سياقة ألفاظها، فإنه ذكرها في موضع من كتابه فكرهت الإطالة بذكرها على نسقها، واقتصرت منها على موضع الحاجة في معرفة مذهبه فيها. ذكر أن الأخبار على ثلاثة أقسام: قسم فيها يحيط العلم بصحته وحقيقة مخبره، وقسم منها يحيط العلم بكذب قائله والمخبر به، وقسم يجوز فيه السرق والكذب. فأما القسم الأول فما وقع العلم بمخبره لوروده من جهة التواتر وامتناع جواز التواطؤ والاتفاق على مخبره، كعلمنا بأن في الدنيا مكة والمدينة وخراسان. You remember in the last lesson we gave the example of Argentina, because most of you probably have been to Mecca and Medina. وأن محمدا النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم دعا الناس إلى الله تعالى وجاء بالقرآن وذكر أن الله تعالى أنزله عليه وأمره وإيانا بالصلاة والزكاة وصوم شهر رمضان وحج البيت. قال عيسى رحمه الله: والعلم بهذه الأشياء علم اضطرار وإلزام، لما ذكرنا من جملة هذه الشرائع ردا على النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم، كأنه سمع النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم يقول ذلك فرده عليه، فيكون ذلك كافرا خارجا عن ملة الإسلام، لأن العلم كان علم ضروري كالعلم بالمحسوسات والمشاهدات، وكالعلم بأنه قد كان قبلنا في هذه الدنيا قوم وأن الموجودين أولاد أولئك، وكالعلم بأن السماء كانت موجودة قبل ولادتنا وما جرى مجرى ذلك. وذكر أنه ليس لما يوجب العلم من هذه الأخبار حد معلوم ولا عدة محصورة ونحو ذلك. وقال أيضا: إن العشرة والعشرين قد لا يتواتر بهم الخبر. So from this passage we learn that more than 500 years before Ibn Hajar rahimahullah, Isa ibn Aban rahimahullah covered the first two conditions which Ibn Hajar rahimahullah just mentioned. And he also stressed upon the same outcome, that a person will get firm knowledge. So the two conditions that he covered are that there should be a huge group, and it is not specified. He said, أنه ليس لما يوجب العلم من هذه الأخبار حد معلوم ولا عدة محصورة ونحو ذلك. And he also said إن العشرة والعشرين قد لا يتواتر بهم الخبر. So that's the first condition. And the second condition is that it should be impossible for them to conspire and agree on a lie. وامتناع جواز التواطؤ والاتفاق على مخبره. And he also stressed on the outcome of Tawātur by saying, وَالْعِلْمُ بِهَذِهِ الْأَشْيَاءِ عِلْمُ اضْطِرَارٍ وَإِلْزَامٍ. So the two conditions that he did not mention from the four conditions of Ibn Hajar rahimahullah are that this great amount should be equal or higher in every link from the beginning until the end. You should have this huge amount. It could be argued that this is covered by the first condition, because when looking at his examples also, it is understood that this condition is implied. So that's the third condition, and then the fourth condition is that the issue should be perceived by the five senses. Although he did not mention it clearly, he did say لأن العلم كان علما ضروريا كالعلم بالمحسوسات والمشاهدات. So these are from Isa ibn Aban. Thereafter, Allama Jassas al-Razi rahimahullah, he presented his definition. But you first need to understand the caliber of Allama Jassas al-Razi and recognize the lofty status that he had within the madhab. He is a mujtahid within the Hanafi madhab. So there is a lengthy discussion about him when one studies Ifta. Ibn Kamal Basha rahmallah considered Allama Jassas al-Razi from the Ashab al-Takhrij, and very surprisingly Ibn Abidin rahmallah followed him. So these are beneficial for those of you who done Ifta and are listening to this lesson. Numerous scholars opposed us and said that he deserves to be called a mujtahid. A very famous statement is that of Allama Marjani rahimahullah, where he says in his book Nadharatul Haqq, ثم إنه عد أبا بكر الرازي الجصاص من المقلدين الذين لا يقدرون على الاجتهاد أصلا، وهو ظلم عظيم في حقه وتنزيل له عن رفيع محله وغض منه وجهل بين بجلالة شأنه في العلم وباعه الممتد في الفقه وكعبه العالي في الأصول ورسوخ قدمه وشدة وطأته وقوة بطشته في معارك النظر واستدلال. ومن تتبع تصانيفه والأقوال المنقولة عنه علم أن الذين عده من المجتهدين كشمس الأئمة ومن بعدهم كلهم عيال على أبي بكر الرازي. Ibn Faras rahmallah also mentions the same in his Hashiyah of Fawaid al-Bahiyya on page 27. And Allama Zahabi rahmallah also considered him to be a mujtahid. In Siyar A'lam al-Nubala, he describes him saying, Al-Imam al-Allamatu al-Mufti al-Mujtahid, Alim al-Iraq, Abu Bakr Ahmad ibn Ali al-Razi al-Hanafi, Sahib al-Tasanif. He also says that وَكَانَ مَعَ بَرَاعَتِهِ فِي الْعِلْمِ ذَا زُهْدٍ وَتَعَبُّدٍ. So this is just in passing, that in spite of being so learned, he was also one who was known for his worship and for not having anything to do with this world. In Al-Bidayah wa Nihaya, Ibn Kathir rahimahullah mentions with regards to him, he praises him saying, انتهت إليه الرئاسة الحنفية في وقته ورحل إليه الطلبة من الآفاق. So after understanding the lofty status and the sublime position, we can now look at his definition of mutawatir. So he says, فالمتواتر ما تنقله جماعة لكثرة عددها لا يجوز عليهم في مثل صفتهم الاتفاق والتواطؤ في مجرى العادة على اختراع خبر لا أصل له. So this is the definition which he gives. So this here is covers the two conditions which we just quoted from Isa ibn Aban. Then he creates divisions within mutawatir. Thus he brought the section of mutawatir, and under the section he first quoted from Isa ibn Aban and then expounded on it further. Other earlier scholars like Allama Abu al-Hasan al-Karhi rahimahullah wrote about usul, but he did not mention anything about mutawatir. Imam Tahawi rahimahullah, he uses the term frequently, but he did not clearly define nor mention any conditions of mutawatir. Likewise, Abu Ali Ahmad ibn Muhammad al-Shashi rahmallah, he too did not mention anything about mutawatir. So you know, this was the scholar who passed away in the year 344 Hijri. Some scholars falsely attribute Usul al-Shashi to him, but you may have studied all the reasons when you are studying Usul al-Shashi that Usul al-Shashi cannot be attributed to him. So although there is a discussion of mutawatir in Usul al-Shashi, since Usul al-Shashi is not correctly it's not proven that he wrote Usul al-Shashi, we cannot consider this discussion in Usul al-Shashi to be from earlier Hanafis. Moving on to the 5th century and the opinions of the scholars on the term mutawatir within that century, there are 3 main scholars in this century. So the first is Abu Zayd Abdullah ibn Umar al-Dabusi rahimahullah. He lived between 369 Hijri to 430 Hijri, and he wrote Taqweemul Adillah. The second is Fakhr al-Islam Abu al-Usr Ali ibn Muhammad al-Bazdawi rahimahullah. He lived between the year 400 Hijri to 482 Hijri, and he wrote what is famously known as Usul al-Bazdawi. The proper name is Kanzul Wusul ila Ma'rifatil Usul. And then the third scholar is Shamsul A'imma Muhammad ibn Ahmad as-Sarakhsi, and Mullah Fazlur Rahman says that you can also pronounce it as Sarkhasi. So he passed away in the year 483 Hijri. So these are 3 famous and reliable books of Usul in the Hanafi madhab: Taqweem al-Adillah, Usul al-Bazdawi, and Usul al-Sarakhsi. Looking at the first, Allama Dabusi rahmallah speaks about mutawatir twice in Taqweem al-Adillah. On page 22, he brings 3 conditions. The first condition is that continuity should be in every stage. Tatabu'un naql. Then the second condition is that such a big amount of people, so many narrators should quote it, that it is impossible for them to collude on a lie. قوم لا يتوهم في العادات تواطؤهم على الكذب. And then the third condition is that there must be a huge amount لكثرتهم. He also mentions the outcome that when a narration is transmitted like this, then a person would have firm conviction. We can also derive the condition concerning the senses from the text, because he says وَذَلِكَ سَمَاعٌ اتَّبَعُوهُ, and then he says كَمَا عَلِمْتَهَا لِلْحَالِ بِالرُّؤْيَةِ. So this all is on page 22. Then on page 207, he further elaborates and adds the condition of بُعْدُ أَمَاكِنِهِمْ. This means that the narrators should be far from each other. They should be living in distant places. When reading this in conjunction with what was stated on page 22 of Taqweem al-Adillah, it seems that this is just an explanation of how we may understand that all the narrators did not conspire and fabricate a lie. So that is, a person can understand that they did not agree on the line by looking that they all lived so distant from each other. So based on this, we can say that it is merely a qaida ittifaqi, a non-essential clause. It is very similar to what Ibn Hajar rahmallah says on page 45, بِأَيْدِي أَهْلِ الْعِلْمِ شَرْقًا وَغَرْبًا. If this was an essential condition of mutawatir, then Allama Dabusi rahimahullah would have mentioned it on page 22. Especially since he says فَحَدُّهُ مَا مَرَّ فِي أَوَّلِ الْكِتَابِ. So that means that he finished defining the term totally at the beginning of the kitab on page 22. The point to note is that Allama Dabusi rahimahullah was taking from those before him. He was not inventing his own definition. So he was merely presenting what Isa ibn Aban and Allama Jassas al-Razi rahimahullah said, and they did not stipulate bu'dul amakin as a condition. In fact, from amongst the examples that Isa ibn Aban rahmallah gave in volume 3 on page 36 is the example of all the people returning from Jumu'ah and informing someone about what happened at the masjid. So this example clearly illustrates that all the narrators could be from one area and in fact could be coming from one masjid. So these additional words are just an explanation and not a stipulation of a condition. However, after Allama Dabusi rahimahullah, we have Allama Bazdawi rahimahullah and Allama Sarakhsi rahimahullah. In his usul, in Kanzul Usul ila Ma'arifat al-Usul, Allama Bazdawi rahimahullah considered tabayunu amakinihim as a condition. Similarly, Allama Sarakhsi rahimahullah, he also stipulated this as a condition in his usul. He defined mutawatir as وَحَدُّ ذَلِكَ أَن يَنْقُلَهُ قوم لا يتوهم اجتماعهم وتواطؤهم على الكذب لكثرة عددهم وتباين أمكنتهم عن قوم مثلهم هكذا إلى أن يتصل برسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم. So it is very clear that they obtained this here from Allama Dabusi rahimahullah based on what he said on page 207 of Taqweemul Adillah. This then led to many Hanafis assuming that this is a vital condition. Thus, many later scholars claimed that not only should there be a large number of narrators, but it is essential that the narrators are from different places. There are two other conditions that Allama Bazdawi rahimahullah mentions. He uses the words la yuhsa adaduhum. So we explained previously that la yuhsa refers to countless narrators, and it is very different to what Ibn Hajar rahimahullah meant when he said la yuhsaru, which implies that the amount should not be stipulated, even though it might be 20 or even 10 narrators. So that's the first condition. And then the second condition which he mentioned is لِكَثْرَتِهِمْ وَعَدَالَتِهِمْ. So this means that a scrutiny will have to be conducted on the integrity of the narrators. They all must be adil. But the muhaqqiqeen who came after Allama Bazdawi rahimahullah, they did not stipulate these conditions. As for Adala, Ibn Hajar rahimahullah discusses this later, so we will elaborate on it then. Thus, until the 5th century, we had 3 conditions that were stipulated. However, the condition of perceiving with the senses was still not clearly stipulated as a condition. In the next century, the main scholar of usul was Allama Alauddin as-Samarqandi rahimahullah. You may recognize him because of his famous book Tuhfatul Fuqaha. So in usul he wrote Mizanul Usul fi Nata'ij al-Uqul. On page 423 of the Doha print, he emphatically mentioned the condition that the narrators should be narrating something which could be perceived. He said, وَالثَّانِي أن يكون المخبر به أمرا محسوسا إما حس البصر وإما حس السمع أما إذا كان أمر معقولا أو مظنونا فإن التواتر فيه لا يوجب العلم يقينا. So this here is the condition. And up to this point now, we have proved that all 4 conditions that Ibn Hajar rahimahullah mentioned were all specified in the Hanafi madhab centuries before Ibn Hajar rahimahullah could present these conditions. Hence, in Qafw al-Athar, the Hanafi book which is based on Nuzha, Ibn al-Hanbali rahimahullah commences the discussion of Tawātur with the condition of it being something that is perceived, and then he mentions all the other conditions. So he divided Tawātur into 2 types. He mentioned فصل في الحديث المتواتر هو ما رواه عن استناد إلى الحس دون العقل الصرف عدد أحالت العادة تواطؤهم على الكذب فقط أو رووه عن مثلهم من الابتداء إلى الانتهاء، ومستند رواية منتهاهم الحس أيضا، فالنوع الأول ما لا طبق له، والثاني ما له طبقتان فأكثر. This is how he explains it. In conclusion, Hanafis have the same conditions as Ibn Hajar rahimahullah, and I mentioned it before him, and there were Hanafi scholars of Usul who stipulated additional conditions such as being from different places and they have to be adil, etc. However, such conditions are not preferred. Now here a question arises: is it essential for there to be such a huge group in the era of the Sahaba? So this is the first question that Maulana Yusuf Jaunpuri rahimahullah officially responded to. When the eyesight of Shaykh al-Ḥadīth Hazrat Maulana Zakaria Kandhlawi rahimahullah, so the correct way of saying it is Kandhlawi, although the Arabs they pronounce it as Kandihlawi because of Ijtima'us Sakinain. You know, if you write it then you got the dal and then you got a ha, so therefore they pronounce it as Kandihlawi, but the correct way is he comes from Kandla, so he pronounce it as Kandlawi. So when the eyesight of Hazrat Maulana Zakaria Kandhlawi rahmallah began weakening, then he instructed Hazrat Maulana Yunus Jaunpuri rahmallah to answer. Then one teacher from Deoban wrote to Hazrat Maulana Zakaria rahimahullah asking him if it is essential for there to be a large group of Sahaba as well. So Maulana Zakaria rahmallah replied that due to his eyesight he will not be able to respond. But he transferred the question to Hazrat Maulana Yunus rahmallah and also officially appointed Hazrat Maulana Yunus as the teacher of Sahih al-Bukhari at Madahir al-Ulum in Saharanpur. So he let him take his place as the teacher of Sahih al-Bukhari. The answer can be found between pages 39 to 41 of Al-Yawaqit al-Ghaliya fi Tahqiq wa Takhrij al-Ḥadīth al-Aliyah. This here is a brilliant kitab. You know that Maulana Chokshi, Maulana Suleiman Chokshi is a ustad of Darul Ulum Zakaria and is one of those unknown gems. He's such a senior and so knowledgeable, yet most people don't even know about him. So he, one day we were having breakfast with him at his home and he really praised this kitab, and that's what raised the interest in me to get the kitab. So Maulana Yunus rahmallah, he replied that Hanafi scholars generally say that the two ends of the chain have to be the same. The two ends of the chain have to be the same. So the one chain is the link of the Sahaba, isn't? Hence, this condition has to apply to them too. Furthermore, in all the examples given of Tawātur, there is always a great amount of Sahaba. Another point which he mentions is that although the Sahaba are trustworthy, there is still the condition of having a good memory and an outstanding retentive ability, dhabt. So when there are multiple Sahaba, then we can rest assured that they have memorized the condition and they have memorized the narration and they are narrating it accurately. But if it is only one Sahabi, then he could be making a mistake, because although he was adil, but he was a human being and he therefore could be making a mistake. Hazrat Maulana Yunus rahmallah then concludes by saying that if there were only one or two Sahaba who narrated and then this narration flourished, it would be a mashhur narration. And this here comes later in the book and we'll discuss more details there inshaAllah. So it will be a mashhur narration, it will not be a mutawatir narration. Now, although we spoke about the knowledge and we quoted from Isa ibn Aban, but from the previous lesson you understood that attaining conviction from mutawatir is so important that some even regarded it as an essential condition. And on the next page, Hafiz ibn Hajar rahmallah again stresses and emphasizes that a person will definitely get firm conviction and absolute knowledge from Mutawātir. Since we are discussing the Hanafi view now, we can explain in this lesson what type of knowledge a person would attain according to Hanafi scholars. So if we look at the scholars of Usul, then we find that they placed even more emphasis on the knowledge that one obtains when a narration is transmitted through Tawātur. For example, Allama Jassas al-Razi spent 12 pages highlighting the conviction and knowledge which a person should obtain. And to quote one paragraph which he quotes from Isa ibn Aban rahimahullah, he said, قال عيسى رحمه الله والعلم بهذه الأشياء علم اضطرار وإلزام لما ذكرنا من جملة هذه الشرائع ردا على النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم كأنه سمع النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم يقول ذلك فرده عليه فيكون بذلك كافرا خارجا عن ملة الإسلام لأن العلم كان علم ضروري كالعلم بالمحسوسات والمشاهدات وكالعلم بأنه قد كان قبلنا في هذه الدنيا قوم وأن الموجودين أولاد أولئك. So this is what we quoted earlier as well. Allama Sarakhsi rahimahullah, he also spent 10 pages in his usul. So from pages 282 to pages 292, he explains how one would obtain ilm al-daruri. He will be forced to accept the knowledge which is transmitted to him through Tawātur. Allama Bazdawi rahimahullah, he uses words such as hatta sara kal mu'ayyan al-masmu'. It is as if the person is witnessing the event first hand and he is seeing and hearing it himself. He then says وَهَذَا الْقِسْمُ يُوجِبُ عِلْمَ الْيَقِينِ بِمَنْزِلَةِ الْعِيَانِ عِلْمًا ضَرُورِيًّا. And this type necessitates ilm al-yaqeen. A person will get absolute conviction as if he witnessed it himself. And that is ilm al-daruri, which we will explain when Ibn Hajar rahimahullah speaks about it on the next page. Thus, when a hadith is transmitted through Tawātur, a person will obtain so much knowledge that it is as if he heard it directly from the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. He heard the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam uttering those words, or he personally saw the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam doing that action. With regards to those who still express reservations and deny that a person can obtain full conviction, Allama Bazdawi rahmallah says, وَهَذَا رَجُلٌ سَفِيهٌ لَمْ يَعْرِفْ نَفْسَهُ وَلَا دِينَهُ وَلَا دُنْيَاهُ وَلَا أُمَّهُ وَلَا أَبَاهُ مِثْلُ مَنْ أَنْكَرَ الْعِيَانِ. That this will be a very foolish person. He will not even be able then to recognize himself or his religion or his any worldly affairs of his. He will not even be able to trust that his mother is his mother or his father is his father, because it is just like one who denies that which is apparent. So he's saying that if a person is going to deny a Tawātur, then there will be so much doubt in the most mundane of things. How would such a person trust who is his mother and who is his father? No one witnessed their mother giving birth to them, nor do they have concrete evidence that the person who they regard as their father is actually their father. The only source that they have to believe that their parents are actually their parents is Tawātur. So if they are going to deny Tawātur, how would they believe that those who are they are regarding as their parents are indeed their parents? Hence, denying Tawātur is like denying that which is clearly apparent, Iyān. It is on the same status as denying something which one witnessed on with his own eyes, like denying that the sky exists or that the sun exists, etc. The earlier scholars placed so much emphasis on the knowledge that one would derive from Tawātur that those who came thereafter added ilm in the definition. So we mentioned few lessons back that many commentators of Nuzha understood that Hafiz ibn Hajar rahmallah added this as an integral condition. But there were scholars who very emphatically, within the Hanafi madhab, who very emphatically mentioned that it is an important condition. For example, Ibn al-Hammam rahimahullah, he defined mutawatir as خبر جماعة يفيد العلم لا بالقرائن المنفصلة بل بنفسه. He mentioned this here in At-Tahrir. So it is the khabar which amounts or which gives the benefit of knowledge, not with separate evidence, but rather by itself. There were so many other scholars of usul who also included ilm in the definition. In passing, to also show you that within the Maliki madhab they done the same. Abul Walid al-Baji al-Maliki, he defined mutawatir as كل خبر وقع العلم بمخبره ضرورة من جهة الخبر. It is every khabar that the one informed would definitely get knowledge just because of the khabar itself. Furthermore, if we look at the examples that scholars gave for Tawātur, we will understand that one will obtain definite conviction. So we just gave examples of the sky, etc., a person's parents, like a person, the only way he knows that his mother is because it reached him through Tawātur, so you can imagine. So the scholars of Usul al-Fiqh also took the following examples from Ḥadīth. The amount of compulsory prayers that there are. So that the fact that you pray 5 times a day. The amount of rak'at in each prayer. That you are praying 2 rak'ats in the Fajr Salah, 4 rak'ats in Dhuhr Salah, 4 rak'ats in Asr. Then the wording of adhan and the percentage of zakat. That when you are discharging your obligatory charity, then you have to give 2.5%. So with this, it becomes apparent why the scholars of Usul al-Fiqh used words as la yuhsa and not la yuhsaru, and why Alama Bazdawi rahmallah actually regarded Adam al-Ihsa as a vital condition. You can see what they had in mind when they spoke about Tawātur. Every Muslim is convinced that there are 5 prayers every day, and that Fajr has to be 2 rak'ats. There has to be 2 rak'ats in the faraz of Fajr. This practice has been conveyed by literally countless of people over each generation. Thus, even if a qualified and a well-learned and reputable mufti has to tell an average Muslim who is not learned that there are 7 rakats in Asr, for example, that person will not trust that mufti, and he will even regard that mufti as insane. So you can see how much conviction a person will get just because of Tawātur. Now, after understanding all that we explained, you should read the chapter of Mutawatir in Al-Madkhal ila Usul al-Ḥadīth ala Manhaj al-Ḥanafiyya. You should make notes and send me the notes. It's extremely important that you read and understand whatever is mentioned there. Ideally, it would have been good if we could go through it, but because